Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Bruchim Habayim. We're continuing on Masechet Rosh Hashanah. We're on Daf Kaf Chet, Amud Aleph, 21 lines down from the top of the Amud. Amar Rav Yehuda B'Shofar Shel Ola. Today's Amud is being learned as a Chud Rufah Shelma for Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, Daniel Moshe Ben Farangis V'Avraham, Binyamin Bat Rina Kera Bat Nazi Sikalit Bat Yafa, Levi Alevi Ben Leah. They should all have Refuah Shelema Be'ezrat Hashem Amen. His Amud is also dedicated to Leilu Nishmat Harav Moshe Yisrael Ben Harav Binyamin and Harav Ezra David Halevi Ben Naftali. That they should have Aliyat Neshama Be'ezrat Hashem. This month's learning of the community has been dedicated graciously by the Shalikar family. Should be a zchut for their family, and also has been all the learnings of the community have been dedicated graciously by the Shea family. Should be an ultimate zchut for their mishpacha as well. Amen. So we started a vast sugya in Shas. We're going to have two back-to-back Shas sugyot that we're going to discuss. This is one of perhaps the most fundamental, famous Gemarot of all time, what we're going to be dealing with in the upcoming Amud. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, and this is something we started last shiur, last week. Amar Rabbi Yehuda b'shofar shel ola lo yitka. Rabbi Yehuda said, a person should not use shofar of a korban ola. You brought the korban ola. Ola is mikotche kodashim. And if you have the horn of a korban ola, you made the shofar with it, it's asur ba'ana'ah. Just like any kachim is asur ba'ana'ah, you cannot use a shofar of a korban ola. But the silver lining is, if you did, you're yotze. But on the other hand, ironically, b'shofar shel shlamim lo yitka. Shlamim is kodashim kalim, also kodashim, but it's kodashim kalim. You should not be using a horn of a korban shlamim to make a shofar and blow into that shofar either. But here, v'imtaka lo yatza. If you did do it, you're not yotze tkiyat shofar, which sounds counterintuitive, right? Ola, who is a bigger kedusha, a higher level of kedusha, you're going to be yotze if you did it. By shlamim, you're not yotze. Why? So it says in my Tama, Ola bat mila, because one of the differences between kodashim kalim and kodesh kodashim is, by kodashim kalim, you don't have the isur of meila. By kodesh kodashim, you have a isur of meila. That means when something is dedicated to kodesh bedek habayit, the goof has kedushat goof in that way that you're not allowed to use it. Same is with korban ola, the korbanot that are kodesh kodashim, that you're not allowed to use any part of it, and if you do, you're mo'el behekdesh. Mashenken shlamim, even though that has kedusha, but it's meant to be used by the balim. Balim eat it, right? Since it doesn't have the element of meila behekdesh, and hence, when you start using something of hekdesh, which is kodesh kodashim and it's asur bemeila. Since you are mo'el behekdesh, the moment that you do me'ila, it becomes yours. It's yatsa lachulin. Now it's no longer hekdesh. So therefore, if you blew shofar with it, this shofar now it's kodesh kodashim or it's a chulin. It's chulin. And with a chulin, you could be yotze tkiyat shofar. Gevaldik. But mashenken, with a shofar of shlamim, that's a lower level of kedusha. Every moment that you're using it, it's asur, and therefore it's like a mitzvah ba'avera. You're not yotze with that. That's how the Gemara sets it up in the beginning. Gemara says, because you have ola bat meilahi kevan de malba. Once you did already meilah, you used the kodesh kodashim, the horn of a korban ola, nafkale lechulin. He already has been desecrated and is now chulin, and with a shofar of chulin you could be yotze. That would be the silver lining over here. But shlamim, the lav b'nei meilaninu, korban shlamim, which is not kodesh kodashim, it doesn't have the prohibition of meilah. Isura uderachivu, they only have a isur, But if you did it, you're yotze. They're not going to become chulin. And therefore, if you did use it by shlamim, you're not going to be yotze. Mitzvah ba'avera. Matkiv la Rava. Rava says, wait a second. Chronologically, when does this become chulin? After you blow. After you already used it. So when you used it, was it asur or was it mutar? It was asur. So therefore, so I don't understand. Ematmal lebatar de taka. After you blow, it's going to be yotze lechulin. So when you are blowing, it's going to be asur, and it shouldn't be yotze. It should be the same thing as shlamim. Ki taka beisura taka. And Amar Rava says, when you follow the logic of this, echadze ve'echadze lo yatsa. Whether you use the horn of a shlamim or whether you use the shofar of olah, lo yatsa. But then Rava says, in second thoughts, I think that's completely wrong by both of them. Hadar Amar, he went back and said, you know what? Really, you're going to be yotze with both of them. Echadze v'echadze yatsa. You know why? Because, and here is the concept, the Shas concept, which is very important, because mitzvot lav le'anot nitu. A mitzvah that you do is not a personal benefit or hana'ah. You are doing an act of mitzvah purely to serve the purpose of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what it is. So the fact that I am using the usage of an item is not considered asur if the mere usage is for a mitzvah. If the only reason I am blowing into this shofar is because I happens to be the first of Tishrei, and I am benefiting from it only so that I did the mitzvah. There's no other benefit I have. The benefit of the mitzvah is not considered a benefit because it's not for me, it's for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, if I am doing only for the purpose of blowing shofar, whether it's olah or shlamim, doesn't make a difference. That's not considered hana'ah, because mitzvot lav le'anot. Right? Now, hold on to that thought for a moment. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, B'shofar shel avodah zara lo yitka, ve'im taka, yatsa. You're not supposed to be blowing into a shofar that was used for the kavod of avodah zara. Now, this is the Gemara we had together in Masechet Avodah Zara, Daf Nun Aleph, I would bet that if you have a shofar that was used to respect the Avodah Zara, that's Tashmishei Avodah Zara, and it becomes Asur Ba'ana'ah. Tashmishei Avodah Zara is Asur Ba'ana'ah. So if I have a shofar of that nature, can I blow on it? It's not such a preferable thing, but if it's the only shofar I've got, and it happens to be the first day of Tishrei, can I blow in it for mitzvah of Tkiyat Shofar? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, b'shofar shel avodah zara lo yitka. You should not. Ve'im taka, but if you did, yatsa. You're yotza the mitzvah. Why? Again, because mitzvot lav le'anot nitnu. It is asur to use anything of tashmishei avodah zara, but if you used it for mitzvah, mitzvot lav le'anot nitnu, hence you're yotze the mitzvah. You did an isur, but the isur is not going to affect the validity of my mitzvah that I did with Tkiyat Shofar. Says the Gemara, B'shofar shel ira nidachat lo yitka. A shofar that you find in ira nidachat. What's ira nidachat? A city whose people, majority of people, have been strayed after avodah zarah. And again, obviously there's a due diligence and a process that you have to follow. But if they become ira nidachat, then you have to burn the town down with all of its assets, right? So any asset that belongs to the city is not just asur ba'ana'ah, but you're going to burn it down, right? Completely destroy it. So it says the Gemara, b'shofar shel nidachat, you go to ira nidachat, before you burn it, you find this amazing shofar, right? Likes of which nobody has ever seen before. And you want to use it now for Tkiyat Shofar. Heif, right? Chaval is bal tashchit. Can you use it for shofar Rosh Hashanah? Absolutely not. What if you did? Are you yotze? Well, following the logic we said, we should say, mitzvot, lav la'anot nitnu, it should be yotze, right? No, wrong. No, it says, ve'im taka lo yatsa. Wait a second. Why not? What could be wrong already? Anything that's asur b'ana, even the thing of avodah zarah, you're yotze with it. It's not going to be worse than avodah zarah. This is an asset of someone that did avodah zarah. It's not tashmisha avodah zarah. So why would it be worse? The Gemara says, my taba, Gemara is bothered with this. And where it says something we've had many times. Last time we had it in Masachat Sukkah, because irani dachat kitut michlat shiure. Because irani dachat is standing to be burnt, right? That's the halacha of irani dachat. Versus et tashmisha avodah zarah, if it's there forever, it's there forever. So it's a shofar with its shiur, but irani dachat, because it has to be burned down. The halacha looks at it already from now as though it's burnt. Now, you say, what's the problem with the shofar that's burnt? At the end of the day, I blew it. The problem with it is you need the shofar to be intact to be yotze, because you have a minimum shiur of a shofar. We had it in the previous Amud, that a minimum shiur of shofar is a tefach. You have to be holding it in your hand, tefach bas. You're holding it in your hand, and you can see it from this side, you can see it from that side. So you need to have shiur. The halacha looks at the particles of this shofar aviran dachat as if they're broken into, little pieces. It's saruf already. It's burnt, and therefore, a shofar that halacha looks at it as though it's burnt doesn't have the minimum shiur. That would be. In other words, it's not a problem of mitzvot lav la'anot. No, you're correct. You're not yotze because it's asur b'ana. That wouldn't be a problem we just mentioned for as far as the mitzvot are concerned. So lav la'anot nidnu. But you need to have a shofar that's intact, and halacha looks at this shofar as though it's not intact, as though you broke it to pieces, to small pieces, and now somehow miraculously was put together, and you blew in it, so you got it out, but it doesn't have, it's like powder shofar, right? That's how we look at it, and therefore you're not yotze. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, let's take this a little bit further in daily life scenarios. If a person says, he gets into a fight with Reuben and says, Reuben, I'm never going to have hana'ah from you. Chalas, right? We're through, we're over, we're never going to talk. I'm never going to have any hana'ah from you. This is mudar hana'ah mechavero. He made a neder that he'll never have hana'ah from his friend. Now, when it comes to Elul time, he realizes, wait a second, the guy, my friend Reuben, is the Baal Tokea of the shul. Can I go to the shul and he'll be blowing shofar and now, is that considered hana'ah? Mutar litkoa lot kiyashin mitzvah. You could go to the shul, could listen to him blowing shofar, being yotzet kiyoshin mitzvah, because again, mitzvot lav la'anot nitnu. It's not given for hana'ah, and therefore it's mutar. Hamudar hana'ah mishofar. If you made a neder that I'm not going to benefit from this shofar or any shofar, right? Neder that you're not going to have hana'ah from it. Mutar litkoa lot kiyashin mitzvah. Still, it's mutar to use the shofar for tikiyot shel mitzvah. Why? Again, mitzvot lav la'anot. So whether it is the object of mudar hana'ah or the person of mudar hana'ah doesn't make a difference. Both of them, mitzvot lav la'anot. To show you how far we take this, that even if you mamash made a neder, it's not considered hana'ah. Now you remember last shiur we ended up with a question from Masachet Nedarim Daf Memchet. In the same case that you said, Reuben, I'm not going to have hana'ah from you, right? And then it turns out that not just Reuben is the Baal Tokea in the shul, but he also sponsored the Sefer Torah of the shul, right? So tomorrow morning, Shabbat, you want to go to the shul and listen to Kriyat Torah, which is also a mitzvah. can I listen to Kriyat Torah? Right? Everyone says yes, yes, yes. But, right? No, no, no. The Gemara says you can't listen to the Kriyat Torah of this fellow. This fellow's Sefer Torah. Why not? Mitzvot lav la'anot nitnu. Right? We have to deal with that. There's a massive problem. This is like a head-on collision with this Gemara, right? Right, we're going to go back to this in just a moment. But Gemara is going to have a similar problem over here. It says the Gemara, if you have this Reuben that you didn't like and you made an neder that I'm not going to benefit from Reuben, Reuben could be the Kohen that takes care of your tumah process, and he sprinkles on you mehatat to become tahor, because again, it's a process of mitzvah over here, so we can understand that. But only, says the Gemara, bimot hageshamim, only in the cold winter days. Avalo bimot hama, but not during the summer months. Why not? Mitzvot lav la'anot nitnu. Again, hamudar mimayan, if you made a neder that I'm not going to use a mayan, I'm not going to use a however body of the water that you have, a spring of water, a river, can I go and do tvilat mitzvah inside the mayan? Tovel bo tvilah shel mitzvah. If you're going for tvilat mitzvah, meaning it's not that you're going to take a shower or a bath, you're going in and out for tvilat mitzvah, you could use that for tvilat mitzvah, says the Gemara, bimot hageshamim, only in the cold winter days. Avalo bimot hachama, not bimot hachama. Why? The reason is very simple, because even though that we say mitzvot lav le'anot nitnu, the mitzvot are not for hana'ah, that's only if the only hana'ah I have is because it's a mitzvah. I'm listening to shofar because it's mitzvah today and first day of Tishrei. The only hana'ah that I'm having is in order to be yotze, the mitzvah. But if I have any side hana'ah over here, right, because it's 110 degrees outside, everyone's shmoiling, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start being machmir for takanat Ezra. It pays. It's kedai to be machmir. I'm going to go have a little dip. It's a mitzvah, right? Doesn't work like that, because now you are obviously benefiting from the water because of the mitzvah, but you're also benefiting because you're cooling off. It's geschmack to jump into a little cool water when you're boiling outside, right? When you're sprinkling the mechatat, and you're schwitzing, you're shivering, versus if it's bimot hachama, you're schwitzing and they're putting it on your geschmack, right? If it's geschmack for you, then that geschmack is an additional hana'ah. That is the mutter, because it's not just the hana'ah that you have that I'm now yotze the mitzvah. That hana'ah is mutar, because mitzvot lav la'anot nitnu. But if you have also a hana'ah of cooling down a little bit in a hot summery day, that additional hana'ah would not be mutar. Now, there was a large machlok in the time of the first generation of Chassidut. There were many that redefined learning Torah Lishma as something that you're not allowed to have your own hana'ah from it, because you're doing it l'shem shamayim. The mitzvah should be learned l'shem shamayim, right? Actually, Noach Weinberg, Yaakov Weinberg, great grandfather, the first Slonim, they were from the Slonim Chassidut. So the first Slonim Rebbe, right, Avram Weinberg, he wrote a sefer. He was the starter of the Chassidut of Slonim. He wrote a sefer called Yesod HaAvodah. And in Yesod HaAvodah, he actually claims that. He says, well, you're not allowed to have, if you want to learn Torah Lishma, you're not allowed to have hana'ah from your learning. You're doing it l'shem shamayim, right? So this became obviously a point of contention. Reb Chaim Volozhiner, in his classic work Nefesh Chaim, writes that obviously that's not what it means when you talk about Torah Lishma. It means L'Shem HaTorah. That means I'm learning in order to understand it fully. That's what Lishma means, right? That's how he says it. Now, the Avnei Nezer, Rabbi Avram Misochichov, which also was a Hasidic Rebbe, but he was also one of the Gdolei Poskim of the generation and generations. He is the son-in-law of the Kotzker Rebbe, right? So he writes in the Hakdama to Iglei Tal, his classic work on Shabbat, he speaks about the concept of learning Torah Lishma, and he says, clearly, having Geshmak when you learn is part of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Not only it's not asur, but it is the mitzvah's definition to have Geshmak in learning Torah. And he says, I'll prove it to you. Because he brings it from the Gemara in Keretot, actually Rashi over here, at the bottom of the Amud here, that we just learned. If you take a look at the last Rashi, we're going to get to that in just a moment, this sugyas. He brings the Gemara that we're going to be mentioning in Masachet Keretot, Daf Yutet, that Hamita'asek b'chalavim u'ba'arayot chayav shkenene. That if you are mit'asek b'chalavim v'arayot, things that naturally a person has hana from, then you are actually chayav. Why? Because you have a natural hana from it. So therefore, says the Avnei Nezer, says you see that when hana is part and parcel of something, physical, then you are hayav, because that's part. As a part of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is the hana that you have from learning. Now, there's even a better raya. The Rabbeinu Avraham Minahar, it is Chidushim Masechet Nedarim Tafemchet. He asks the question that we just asked 5 minutes ago. He says, "Wait a second. Why is it that I was mudar hana from Reuben, right? Why is it that all of a sudden, if he has a Sefer Torah that he donated to the shul, I can't?" We said the shofar we could use, right? If the shofar of the shul belongs to Reuben, I could be yotze Kiyat shofar with it, because mitzvot lav la'anot need to. But if the Sefer Torah of the shul is donated by, I can't use it. Why? Says Rabbi Avraham Nahar, because when you listen to the Torah, the mitzvah of Kriyat Torah is a form of Limud Torah. And the mitzvah of Limud Torah is Geshmak. And that hana that you have is an additional hana. You're supposed to be having a Geshmak from learning Torah, right? It's the gishmakest thing in the world. It's supposed to be like that. And therefore, it's not just that technically I'm being yotze, the mitzvah of Kriyat Torah that the Chazal instituted. Yeah, that too. And maybe if you would be surgically removing the two parts from each other, we would say mitzvot lav la'anot need to on that. But part and parcel of the mitzvah of learning Torah is gishmak that you're going to have when you learn Torah. And that gishmak is not anything less than jumping into nice cold water in the schwitzing hot summer, that you have this innate hana'ah. It's not just the tevilat mitzvah that I'm being yotze, but I'm also having a geshmak, and that's asr for a mudar ba'ana'ah. And here also, because the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is geshmak, and it's supposed to be like that, then you are asr to use the Sefer Torah of this person if you're mudar hana'ah from him, right? So that's an additional hana'ah, not just the hana'ah of the mitzvah. And whenever you have that, then it will become actually asur if you're mudar hana'ah. So says the Gemara, we're going to take this a little bit further. And this is now really starting a new sugya. We have time to start it at this. This is a segue to another, perhaps, one of the most fundamental, famous Gemarot in Shas. Shalchule.
That's a question of mitzvah sana. There's a precept: if someone steals a mitzvah from somebody, they can make a monetary claim, right? So if mitzvahs are not given for hana, how can they make them? What are they taking away that they can make a monetary claim?
So you're saying like this. In other words, one of the topics that we're going to talk about at the end of this Amud is the following question. I am getting the mitzvah of shofar, right? I'm getting the mitzvah of shofar by listening to the shofar of this person, right? The shofar belongs to him and he's the Baal Tokeh. Still I could use it. Even though that I'm mudar hana from him, and he owns the shofar and he's the Baal Tokeh, still it could be, because mitzvot la I don't need to. But wait a second. I'm going to get a lot of olam haba for listening to the shofar on the day of Rosh Hashanah. Who gave me that? Well, him. That's a hana. It's a hana that I'm willing to pay for, right? How much money would you be able to pay if I would prevent you from listening to shofar on the day of Rosh Hashanah? How much money would you pay in order to be able to listen to it? Right? It's a good barometer of the chashivut that you have for the mitzvah. Right? Millions of dollars. You would be able to, it's worth something. Can't say it's not worth anything. That's not, but that obviously that is, but every mitzvah is like that. When we say mitzvot lav la'anot nitnu, it means the hana'ah, doesn't mean that I'm not benefiting from it. Doesn't mean that. What it means is the benefit that I have from it is purely mitzvah oriented, right? And the mitzvah is not given for hana'ah. The mitzvah is given for service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are his servants, we are his avadim, and we're serving him, and that's that. Now, the fact that I really want to serve him, and I will even pay money for it, right? So it makes the hana'ah a more profound hana'ah, still does not take it out of that category and enter into a personal, it's not a personal hana'ah. It's hana'ah I would pay money for, but I would pay money for it because I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's part of my service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Now, we're going to take this to the next level of explanation with examples at the end of the Amud, but that's the gist of the answer to that question. Now, we're going to have a segue here to the mitzvah, to the concept of mitzvot tzrichot kavana, right? In other words, we spoke about the fact of the machloket, if mitzvot need to have a mindfulness, or maybe mitzvot are only a physical action that you ought to do, right? You have to eat in the sukkah, so you have to eat in the sukkah. And that's that. That means if your physical body is under a physical sukkah that's kasher, and you're having your suda, hazaku baruch, you're yotze, right? If you're supposed to be shaking lulav etrog and hadasim v'aravot, and you have all the kosher species together and you shook it, even though that you're completely not mindful that today is a mitzvah to do that, right? Some Chabadsker just came and handed to you and said, just shake this, believe me, right? And you did. Are you yotze or are you not yotze, right? You're doing a mitzvah. Are you? Do you have to have the mindfulness? Or maybe it's only going through the actions of the mitzvah, but not necessarily the mind has to be involved with it as well. So that's really the question that we're going to be discussing. Mitzvot srichot kavana or mitzvot lav srichot kavana, the whole saga of L'Shem Yichud and the Biuda and so on and so forth, which is a fascinating and important topic, B'ezrat Hashem, in the days to come. Hazak Baruch.